The two world wars that America went through obviously brought about a lot of death and a lot of damage. But in the end, not only did we successfully make it through both of the wars, but we also changed something for the better here on the home front. And it had nothing to do with what we were actually fighting for. It was the role that women play in society. Prior to the World Wars, it was not acceptable for a woman to leave the house and go to work. A woman was supposed to find a husband, have some children, and then spend her life taking care of them and being a homemaker while her husband went out to work. That is, until World War I rolled around. Then everyone quickly realized that factories needed workers, but those male workers that used to be in those positions were now in the military. And so women quickly began to fill up the jobs that were previously only for men. Women even became active members of the military. The Navy and the Marines accepted women and gave them full rank. However, the Army never really did. They just called them volunteers. Women began working as nurses and were put into other secretary-type positions so that men could be freed up and go to fight. Some of the most famous women were known as the Hello Girls. These were a small group of women that would translate primarily French military messages for the Americans to read. On the home front, women suffragists saw an opportunity and took it when they decided to use the fact that women were now working outside of the home and in the military as proof that if they can do that, then they should be able to vote too. One line that they would post around said, "We are ready to work beside you. We are ready to fight beside you. We are ready to die beside you. Now let us vote beside you." The efforts of these suffragists finally paid off in 1920 with the help of Woodrow Wilson only 2 years after the First World War was over. The ratification of the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. After the war, women also got to keep some jobs outside of their house. They were allowed to do things that were considered feminine by society, such as nursing, secretary work, or working in something like a textile mill. Unfortunately, they didn't get to keep many of the other factory jobs that they held during the war, but this was a huge advancement when, just before the war, women weren't really supposed to go outside of the home to work at all. But a huge pressure was still put on women by society to not work. You could only go out and work if you were a single woman without a family. And if you were a single woman without a family, you were probably getting told by everyone that you know that you need to find a husband and you need to have children. Because, again, at this time, they thought that was the woman's natural purpose in life. Why doesn't some wise man get up and explain? Until World War II. Society went from not wanting women to work to needing women to work. 15 million men were sent off to be in the military, and the U.S. economy was shifting from a civilian one that made household goods and foods to a war economy that needed to pump out as many military supplies as possible. Car factories started making planes and tanks, and textile factories started making military uniforms. When I was a kiddie, we had an old cherry tree. It was Father's pride and joy. One day he went to town, I thought I'd chop it down, just like Mrs. Washington's dear boy. The United States wanted to outproduce everyone else. We wanted more guns, more tanks, more bombs, more everything than anyone else because they would run out and we wouldn't. And without the American women who went to work, our massive production rate would have been impossible. Many women worked 6 days and 48 hours a week after the government started putting out Rosie the Riveter campaigns and other types of propaganda that encouraged women to get out into the workforce. She captured New York just to see all the sights, but how about those weekend trips to Washington Heights?
Say, how could Washington be a married man and never, never tell a lie? Why doesn't
And for the first time,
man get
women
up
were
and
actually
explain
enlisted
why
into the
doesn't
United
he
States
clear
Army
up
with
my
full
poor
rank,
mother
unlike the
brain?
title
Why
volunteer that
doesn't
they earned in World
history
War I.
tell us the mystery?
The military
Why
created
doesn't
certain divisions for the
somebody
woman,
do
like the
it?
WAAC,
Oh, Georgie,
or
we're walking
WASP,
our 2
which
Island
was the
Dream.
Women's Air
The
Force Service
Independence
pilots.
Declaration says liberty.
The Army still
So
didn't
how
want women to
could
appear manly in both how
Washington be
they
a
looked and the
married
jobs and
man and never,
activities that they
never
took
tell
on.
a lie?
So they made women wear dresses and kept them from playing sports like softball that they feared would make them too boyish. They also tried to keep women in feminine positions like nursing and secretary type work. WASP was an exception that allowed female pilots to take cargo to bases and even test fly newly repaired planes. However, after just 2 years, this program was shut down. But for the most part, the military did their best to keep women ultra-feminine, fearing that the public would reject anything else, thus forcing women out of the war effort when they knew that they need them.
But in reality, society back on the home front was changing. Women were wearing overalls and bandanas while working as mechanics and building bombs. Essentially, the military was behind the times.
Why doesn't he clear up my poor mother brain? Why doesn't history tell us the mystery? Why doesn't somebody...
When the war ended, the same thing that happened back in World War I happened again. Women were being pushed out of their jobs. This was due to a couple different reasons. The economy was shifting back to a civilian economy. Factories no longer needed as many workers because they weren't running 3 shifts and producing as many war goods as possible anymore. They were maybe running 1 or 2 shifts and simply going back to producing civilian goods like cars or just household things. Another reason was because the men veterans wanted their jobs back. They didn't want women taking their jobs, and they wanted to be back in the superior role that they previously had over women. So factories and other organizations began to fire women. They told them to either go back to the pink-collar jobs, like nursing or secretary work that they were allowed to do after World War I, or to go be a homemaker and take care of their husband and raise some kids. After all, it was the time of the baby boom. But things would never be the same. After women proved themselves in these 2 world wars, they never got rid of that Rosie the Riveter attitude, and they slowly gained more respect and more job opportunities that may have never come up if it weren't for these 2 world wars.
Explain, why doesn't he clear up my poor mother brain? Why doesn't history tell us the mystery? Why doesn't somebody